Sir, I learned this song from my mommy. The little girl played the piano, and the lonely CEO froze. Snow had been falling all evening, the kind that softened the world and made even the loudest city feel hushed. And in the warm glow of a Christmas gathering hall, a single moment was about to crack open a man's carefully guarded heart. The piano keys gleamed under golden lights, evergreen garlands shimmered, and a little girl in a red dress climbed onto the bench with feet that barely touched the floor. Across the room stood a man who had built empires, signed deals worth millions, and mastered the art of silence. Yet the instant her small hands hovered over the keys, his breath caught as if the air itself had turned heavy. He did not know why his chest tightened, only that something long buried was stirring, something that refused to stay quiet any longer. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change big lives, please take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. The man was named Jonathan Miller, a CEO known in New York boardrooms for his calm precision and in the business press for his relentless success. He had arrived at the Christmas charity event alone, as he always did, wearing a tailored suit and a polite smile that never reached his eyes. The event was hosted by his company's foundation, a yearly tradition meant to show goodwill, but for Jonathan, it was another obligation to check off before returning to an empty penthouse overlooking the Hudson. He stood near the back, hands folded, watching employees, families, and volunteers laugh together, feeling like a visitor in a country he no longer understood. Applause echoed around the room as the organizers announced a small musical surprise, and Jonathan prepared himself for a pleasant but forgettable performance. The kind that filled the air and vanished without leaving a mark. The little girl's name was Emily Carter, and she had been waiting all evening for her turn. She was 5 years old, with soft blonde hair tied back by a pink ribbon and cheeks flushed from excitement. Her mother had signed her up weeks earlier, believing that music had a way of making people feel less alone. Emily had practiced on an old upright piano in their small apartment, repeating the melody until it felt like part of her breathing. She did not fully understand the importance of the event or the power of the audience before her. She only knew that the song reminded her of bedtime, of warm arms, and of a voice that used to hum along when the world felt safe. As Emily began to play, the room leaned in without realizing it. The melody was simple, almost fragile, each note placed with care rather than confidence. But there was something honest in the way she played, something untouched by fear or expectation. Jonathan felt his shoulders tense, his mind reaching backward against his will. The song was an old Christmas hymn his mother used to play on their piano in a modest Ohio home, long before success had carried him away. He had not heard it in decades, not since the year everything fell apart. His fingers curled into his palm, and for the first time in years, he did not try to push the memory away. Jonathan had grown up in a house where love was quiet but steady. His mother, Margaret Miller, believed deeply in faith, kindness, and the healing power of music. She played the piano every evening after dinner, filling the house with hymns and gentle melodies that made even hard days feel lighter. When Jonathan was 16, illness took her quickly, leaving behind an empty bench and a silence that felt unbearable. His father withdrew into grief, and Jonathan learned to survive by building walls, by focusing on achievement rather than emotion. Music became something he avoided, a reminder of a loss he never learned to mourn properly. Now, standing in a room filled with strangers, Jonathan felt that old ache rise to the surface. The notes Emily played were not perfect, but they carried the same tenderness his mother's hands once had. His throat tightened, and he lifted a hand to his mouth, shocked by the intensity of his reaction. Around him, people smiled and whispered, some wiping away tears, but Jonathan stood frozen, caught between the man he had become and the boy he used to be. The challenge he faced was not one of business or strategy, but of allowing himself to feel, of facing a grief he had buried under years of success. Emily played on, her small shoulders relaxed, her eyes bright with concentration. She felt proud, thinking of her mommy listening somewhere in the room, even though she could not see her clearly. Her mother, Sarah Carter, stood near the back, hands clasped, heart pounding. Life had not been kind to them. After losing her husband in a car accident 2 years earlier, Sarah worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads, relying on faith and determination to keep going. Music had been a comfort for Emily, a way to remember her father and find joy again. Sarah never imagined that her daughter's simple song would reach someone like Jonathan Miller. As the final notes faded, the room erupted into applause. People stood, clapping and smiling, some cheering softly, moved by the innocence and warmth of the moment. Emily beamed, swinging her legs, basking in the sound without fully understanding why it mattered so much. Jonathan remained still, his hands slow to join the applause. Something inside him had shifted, and he knew he could not simply walk away as he always did. The struggle now was whether to retreat into his familiar isolation or step forward into vulnerability, a place he had avoided for far too long. The event continued, but Jonathan's attention stayed fixed on the piano bench and the little girl who had unknowingly unlocked his heart. Memories flooded him, not just of loss, but of joy, of evenings spent beside his mother as she played, of prayers whispered before bed, of a faith he had quietly abandoned when the pain became too much. He realized that in chasing success, he had also been running from himself. The loneliness he carried was not the absence of people, but the absence of connection, of meaning beyond profit and prestige. Later that evening, as guests began to leave and the lights dimmed, Jonathan found himself walking toward the piano. Emily had already climbed down, her mother kneeling to hug her tightly, both of them glowing with happiness. Jonathan felt an unfamiliar nervousness as he approached, unsure of what to say or how to explain the emotions still swirling inside him. He simply stood there for a moment, looking at the piano, then at the child and her mother, feeling a pull toward honesty he could no longer ignore. Without words, Jonathan placed a hand gently on the piano's worn wood, feeling the grain beneath his fingers. It reminded him of home, of faith, of a love that had never truly left him. He understood then that this moment was not an accident. It was an invitation, a reminder that even the most guarded hearts can be reached by simple truth. The challenge ahead would be to change, to let this awakening shape his life beyond this single evening. In the weeks that followed, Jonathan could not forget Emily's song. He found himself returning to the Foundation's work, with renewed purpose, visiting shelters, schools, and community centers, not as a distant benefactor, but as a participant. He requested that music programs be expanded, believing deeply now in their power to heal. He even had a piano delivered to his apartment, letting the silence be replaced once again by sound. At first, he only listened, then slowly, hesitantly, he began to play, clumsy fingers finding familiar notes, tears falling freely without shame. For Sarah and Emily, life continued with its usual challenges, but something had changed for them too. The Foundation reached out with support for Emily's music education, easing a burden Sarah had carried alone. More importantly, Emily's confidence grew, her joy spreading to those around her. She did not know the ripple effect of her courage, only that playing music made people smile, and that was enough. Jonathan's transformation was not sudden or easy. There were days he retreated into old habits, moments when grief resurfaced sharply, but now he faced it with faith rather than avoidance. He visited his mother's grave for the first time in years, standing quietly, letting the wind carry the echoes of that familiar hymn. He realized that success without connection was empty, and that true wealth lay in compassion, forgiveness, and service. As Christmas approached again, Jonathan returned to the same hall, this time not as a lonely observer, but as a man ready to belong. The piano stood polished and waiting, and the room filled with laughter and warmth. Emily played once more, her notes stronger now, her smile brighter. Jonathan listened with tears in his eyes, not from pain but from gratitude. He knew that some moments are gifts, meant to remind us who we are and who we can still become. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of kindness, music, and second chances, please take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive and reaching those who need hope the most. Before the ending, we have one special request for you. Please comment below and tell us what moment in this story moved you the most, or share a memory of a song that changed your life. Your words matter more than you know. In the end, the little girl never knew the full weight of the gift she gave that night, and the CEO never forgot the lesson she taught him. That even the smallest hands can carry the biggest healing, and that sometimes all it takes to unfreeze a lonely heart is a simple song learned from love. The applause faded, but the echo of Emily's song refused to leave Jonathan Miller's heart. Long after the hall emptied and the Christmas lights were turned off, he sat alone in his car, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield as snowflakes melted against the glass. For the first time in years, he did not start the engine right away. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt full of memories, questions, and a quiet calling he could no longer ignore. Something inside him whispered that this night was not an ending, but a beginning. In the days that followed, Jonathan found himself replaying the moment again and again. Board meetings felt distant, profit charts meaningless. His employees noticed a change, a softness in his eyes, a patience that had not been there before. He began asking questions he never used to ask, about people rather than performance. When he finally returned home one evening, he stood in the center of his penthouse, surrounded by expensive furniture that suddenly felt cold and lifeless. On impulse, he opened a locked closet he had not touched in years and pulled out an old photograph of his mother sitting at the piano, smiling gently as if she knew he would need that image someday. For the first time, he did not turn away from the pain. He let it wash over him, and instead of breaking him, it softened him. Jonathan made a decision that surprised even himself. He asked his assistant to find Sarah Carter and her daughter, not to make headlines or offer charity checks, but to say thank you. When they met at a small cafe weeks later, Sarah was nervous, unsure why a man like Jonathan Miller would want to see them. Emily clutched her mother's hand, then brightened when she recognized him as the man who had stood so still during her performance. Jonathan listened as Sarah shared her struggles, her faith, and her hopes for Emily. He did not interrupt. He did not rush. For once, he simply listened, and in doing so, he felt more human than he had in decades. From that meeting grew something unexpected. Jonathan expanded the foundation's mission, focusing on music programs for children who had lost parents, children carrying grief too heavy for their small shoulders. He visited these programs personally, sitting in modest rooms filled with laughter, off-key singing, and hope. Each visit chipped away at the walls he had built around his heart. He even invited Emily to play at the foundation's annual Christmas concert the following year, not as a symbol, but as a reminder of why it all mattered. As the next Christmas arrived, the hall felt warmer, brighter. Jonathan stood near the piano again, but this time he was not alone. When Emily began to play, stronger and more confident, he closed his eyes and smiled through tears. He felt his mother's presence not as a loss, but as a legacy, carried forward through kindness and faith. In that moment, Jonathan understood that loneliness is not cured by success, but by connection, and that healing often arrives through the smallest, most unexpected hands. The song ended, the room erupted in applause, and Jonathan joined in fully, his heart finally free. He knew his life would never be the same, and for the first time, that truth filled him with peace rather than fear. Some songs do more than entertain. They awaken souls, restore faith, and remind us that even after the longest winters, hearts can learn to feel again.